Hi, Dr. Oneglan here, and this is Creating a .NET Core Application, Part 3. So Part 3, we're just, hopefully this will be a short one. I really just want to show you how to make changes. So since we're dealing with the code first on this one, we actually created this entire system by defining a model, and then that model we translated over to the database. So if you looked at my previous version, and I'm not gonna go through typing all this stuff in, it's just waste of time. But if you looked at my previous version of my class donation materials, it had all the fields, but the fields themselves didn't have any other information. So I added a few things. One of the things I added was some data annotations, and to do that, you need to use the data annotations namespaces, which are system component model data annotations and system component model data annotations dot schema. And what that does is it allows you to put these annotations in here that are shown in the square brackets that allow you to do a little bit more definition of the interface. Like I can say, hey, I want this column here to be a decimal 18.2. That'll actually kind of define what goes on in the database too, because we're going to look at that in just a second here. Now, the big thing that I did, though, that wouldn't actually make any difference right there. Those little changes right there don't have a tremendous amount of impact on the database. And the nice thing is that I can just easily go ahead and, I could go and I could delete those pages and rebuild them. But the reality is none of the changes that I made right here require a rebuild of these pages. So that's kind of a nice thing. However, the scaffolding wasn't hard to do, and I haven't made so many changes that it would be very difficult to do the scaffolding. So, I could go in here, and to do that simple, if I want to rescaffold it, I simply delete all this, delete those, and then I go back and I go through the steps that I did in part 1 where I rescaffold it. I don't need to do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Now we are going to talk a little bit about how to make changes to these individual pages because they're not that complex to work with. And in fact, we probably do because I'm going to look at this. We're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and view this in the browser, and just because now it is about making changes. When I look at this in the browser, I don't like this. It's not terrible, but I don't like where the create button is. I don't even like the name of the create button has the word create. I don't, create. What does that mean? Okay, I want you to enter the there's more information I want to put here, but these pages can all be modified. It's all just code. So once you learn how to modify the code, it's all relatively simple. And since this is all classes, this is all actually got classes, we can even just modify the CSS and make it really, really simple. Not the modification we're talking about, though. The modification I'm talking about is the fact that I went to this model that I created, donation materials, and I made some of the fields nullable. Well, kind of the first thing to note is how I did that. Well, there's an easy way to do this. See that little question mark right there after string? If I just have the string, it's not nullable. But by putting that question mark at the end of the string, I actually made it a nullable field. And so why is that important? Well, it's important because if in the database you want it to be a nullable field. All right, so once I've made the changes, and I could do other things here. I could add a column. I could change the size of columns. I can do a lot of things that are possible, but reality is that right now the only thing I wanted to do was make some of these fields nullable. And if you want to look at the data annotations, these are just examples. There's a lot of different types of annotations that you can do that define how the thing actually gets displayed. These are important to learn because, like display, name equals name of materials, well, that's what's actually going to get displayed in the create and edit fields that you've got there. Now, I'm going to go over here to my package manager, and I'm just going to go through what I did. I've already done it, so I don't need to do it again. But what I did is, after I've made the changes to the model, I went ahead and I added a migration. This time I called it make nullable, and the reason I called it make nullable, that is just a name, and it's descriptive in that I made fields nullable. I could have called it made some fields nullable, and it's the context of the Grief Heroes context. And after I executed that, it created a new migration. It actually added the migrations up here, and I've got a new migration. That was done. Now, if I go and see what the next thing that I did is, I executed the update database with the context, brief here's context, flag set. And if I go over here now to the database, if you looked at it in my last video, and great, now I made it too huge. If you looked at it in my last video, you would have seen that all these fields were not null. But now, many of those fields are nullable. So what I've actually done here is I've defined a workflow for something that you're going to do on a relatively common basis. Now, I haven't gone into other portions of that potential workflow, which is going in to these specific pages and making modifications to the pages directly. But that isn't really that hard to do. Remember, it's all code. I can go into these pages and I can make changes, or I can add things based on the models on the outside. The only difference between this code and code that you wrote was I had the system build all this for me, which gave me a huge head start in writing. I mean, it wrote a lot of the code for me. Okay, but it's the same as if you had done it yourself. Now, once I've done all that, once I've gone ahead and I've done the migration and updated the database, it now will have those fields as nullable, and I've created it so that in the interface, the fields are nullable in the interface. I should test that. This is a live test. Let's go and view into the browser. Whoops, I have to do it here. That was the wrong one. Don't know why it even let me do that. That was kind of interesting. Whoops. That's a new one. Let's go to index. Let's see if I can view in browser here. Oh, you know what? I think I've got a process open. Yes, I do. I have a process open. That should fix it. Yeah. I had just run it and I never closed it. Okay, so now you can see that those things have changes. And if I went in and let's say I edited the details of this, and let's just, okay, description actually has, let's take this out. I hit save. Okay. Now, in this case, the image URL is not a fully qualified. Okay, now that isn't because it's empty. I can actually, the best way to deal with that is probably just to empty it because it can be nullable. But let's go back and look at that because one of the things that I did, I'll show you what I did here. Let's go back and edit that again. Here in the image URL, I need a URL there. And how did it told me that the URL was not valid. So therefore, I couldn't enter just that basic screen there, which was just some text that wasn't a URL. Well, if I come back over here to the model, I specified that these needed to be URLs by putting in that annotation tag URL. Okay, so now that's going to beg another question. Where can I get these annotation tags? And the, let's see, I'm going to pull this up. And I thought I had them available, but if I go in, say, data, if I Google data annotations, I can come back over to here, and there's the namespace, and there's a lot of Google stuff on this, so you can get the, well, what is it? Okay, well, what I just told you, and what are they? There is, you can look at the documentation here, and I'm looking for the documentation, the actual Microsoft documentation, which for some reason seems to be way further. Oh, here we go, docs. The namespace, and it will show you the different annotations that you have. The one thing about Microsoft documentation, okay, let me go ahead and give a rant here. All right, so one of the classes in the annotations namespace is URL attribute, right? I can go through this, and it does a lot of information. It's got the properties and the methods and When you're looking at this right here, where's the example? Okay, how do you use it? Because I can tell you right now, there's some stuff in here that is useful, but the reality is that, most of the users that come in here looking at documentation are going to want to know how to use the annotation, not all the nitpicky details of the documentation. And Microsoft is really bad about that in their documentation. Give examples, people. Hey, gives me something to do. I gave you an example. That's how you use it right there, URL. Okay. But there's a whole lot of them here. I might have just ranted on the URL, but you've also got, there's actually some good documentations of the custom ones, but like phone, range, min length, max length, email address. Okay, so there's quite a few of these, and they're very, very useful because it makes validation almost trivially easy. Server-side validation, you just gotta love it. Anyway, that's it for now. That's part 3. Part 3. In part 4, we're going to go ahead and add another model that has a dependency. And how do you deal with that? On out, and hopefully you're enjoying some good coding at this stage. You should be able to really start building some applications now.